Let's move on to our Bookstr segment. Sarah's not with us again today, but we do have Don Winslow with us today, and he's got a book called The Force, which is right there, and I've got a copy right here too, which I'm going to get you to sign. Welcome, Don.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us what we've got here in The Force.
Well, The Force is a book about a unit in the NYPD, the New York Police Department, that's charged with getting guns and drugs off the street. It deals with the heroin epidemic, but it's a story about a guy, a cop, who's been an 18-year veteran who goes wrong. And he and his partners make one of the biggest heroin busts in New York City history and keep half the drugs and half the guns and the money.
And did you get this story ripped from the headlines? What made you want to write a book about the NYPD, and how did you get this storyline?
Yeah, you know, I've been wanting to do an NYPD book for 20 or 30 years. My last 2 or 3 novels have been about the Mexican drug cartels and very close to the headlines, very close to reality. So is this book. You know, about every 20 years or so, we get a major corruption scandal in NYPD. So there's very little in this book that hasn't actually happened. Now, I hasten to add, the book's dedicated to 178 police officers who were killed in the line of duty just during the time I was writing this book. So it's by no means an anti-police book.
Well, and that's, I'm sure, given the timing and a lot of animosity toward police, people might question you, why now?
Well, and that's one of the reasons, as a matter of fact. I mean, I wanted to take some of these current issues head on. I wanted to explore the issues of why people are hostile toward police, the shootings of unarmed young black men, all of these, certainly, and the racial issues that we seem to be confronting, you know, much more viscerally. Right now are all part of the book, and those are part of police officers' lives and things I wanted to explore.
And it's fiction, but you didn't base, I mean, it's fiction, but it's not based only on imagination. You spent years researching the NYPD in order to be able to have I mean, this is not just solely fiction. There's a lot of research behind it. What was that like? What did you discover, and how does it inform your opinion on those issues you've been talking about in the
Yeah, listen, it educated me a lot. You know, I had a journalism professor one time who told me, "You are professionally ignorant." And at first...
Can I get that trademarked?
You know,
I want to put it on a t-shirt. I am.
Finally a job I'm fitted for, you know. But I like that, because what it really says is now go out and find out.
That's what Socrates said.
Yeah.
You're only wise if you know how little you know.
Right. And so when I start to write a novel, you know, usually I'm writing one book and I'm researching the other. So I did a book called The Cartel about the Mexican drug cartels. It took me about 5 years to write. While I was writing that, I was researching this book, and I learned a lot. You know, some things surprised me, other things didn't. One thing I was always impressed by, or freshly impressed by, was how much cops care about what they do, how much they care about the victims. What's the impact on cops' lives, the things that they see and that they go through every day, and how do they adapt to that? What do they think about incidents in Ferguson and Chicago and New York? So a lot of stuff.
My brother has been a cop, and you said freshly impressed by their public service and their devotion to public safety. Why isn't that story in the broader media? I mean, you portray the cop as more of an anti-hero and a corrupt person, when most people are like my brother, who are like literally risking his life, and he's got a young son, to protect people he doesn't even know.
Absolutely, and I say this all the time. I just said in an interview, you know, when I go to work, my wife's biggest worry is I might come home in a bad mood, but she knows I'm coming home. Cops' wives and increasingly cops' husbands don't have that assurance. Now, you characterize this character as an anti-hero and a corrupt cop. I'm not interested in those characterizations, not interested in hero or anti-hero, not interested in corrupt cop versus clean cop. All of the incidents in these books are based on reality. I'm writing about these guys at this time. There are a lot of cops in the book who aren't dirty. There are a lot of cops in the book, including Denny Malone, the lead character, who perform acts of courage and compassion. So I think it's a mixed bag, you know, and I don't think that we can make generalizations in one way or the other about all cops any more than we can make generalizations about all radio hosts.
You've got a history of writing about drug cartels, and this
I
is
do.
a book about drugs.
Yeah.
The opioid epidemic has probably been bad for a while. It's certainly getting a lot more attention right now.
It's now worse than the AIDS crisis
Yeah.
in terms of the impact on lives.
62,000 Americans in 2016 died of overdoses, more than in car accidents.
In your research, what are we doing well, and what are we not doing well, and what could we do better? I mean, how do we address this? You see that, I'm sure you've all seen that viral picture of the mother and father who overdosed in the car with their child in the back seat in Ohio. The police officers, you talk about caring about the people who they're working with and serving, took this picture in Ohio, and they put it online specifically because it was heartbreaking and they were hoping to get people to wake up. What do we need to be doing better? What fixes this?
I talk with police officers about this every day, and I've been to the overdose deaths, and I've been to the funerals, and if you want to talk about the causes of the opioid epidemic, we could certainly get into that on a technical level. But to answer the question that you asked me, what are we doing?
That never happens here, by the way. So
I'm going to try. I'm going to try, sir, to actually answer the question. Actually answer the question you asked me. As long as we focus on the supply side of the heroin epidemic, we will never make any progress. You cannot stop the flow of drugs. It will not work. It has never worked. It hasn't worked for the past 50 years. It won't work for the next 50 if we keep doing what we're doing. We do know what does work. What does work is putting focus on treatment and rehabilitation. And in a deeper sense, backing up before people use heroin, putting focus on education and on creating jobs. Those are the things that drop heroin use, drop opioid use, and drug use in general.
Needle exchange programs and those sorts of very controversial tactics work? They don't work?
Well, they work doing what they do. I'm all in favor of needle exchange programs because it helps keep people safe, helps keep people who don't use drugs safe from getting infected through sexual contact. So I'm all for those as temporary fixes, but we need to look at the root causes of the epidemics. Opioid use is always a reaction to pain. Usually it's physical pain, and then people go on, right, to using them for different reasons. But it's always a cure, I use that term loosely, for some kind of pain.
Often emotional.
Yes, so let's look at the causes of the pain. While we treat it as a criminal issue, 85%, and this is what police talk to me about, and this is what they're frustrated about. Maybe your brothers talk to you about this. 85% of the people checked into a jail on any given night have an alcohol or a drug problem or a mental health problem. So we're asking our police not only to be police, but to be doctors, EMTs, mental health professionals. Our jails have become our de facto detox centers and mental health facilities. So what we need to do, there was an article in the New York Times the other day about certain jurisdictions in Kentucky that are, yes, convicting people of drug use, but then forcing them into rehab. I could agree with that sort of approach, but we need to be putting much more emphasis on treatment and rehab than we do on trying to prevent those drugs from coming across the border.
That all makes, I completely agree with all of that. And Amy Glass has a comment here. She says, cops are human. We all have both good and bad in us, which is, certainly something that the arts have explored, throughout human history.
All characters are complex, and the best characters are complex. The ones in your book are certainly not all good, as you say, not an anti-hero, not all good and all bad.
Yeah, listen, it's boring to write about simplistic characters and probably more boring to read about simplistic characters. I don't want to do that. I like writing characters that have nuances and that have conflicts.
What about community policing? Because people have said that that's the solution here in terms of improving the relationship between communities, neighborhoods that are suffering, and the police who are there to protect them.
Absolutely. Look, what cops tell me, and I speak to cops on all levels, do you know what I mean? From street cops to police chiefs. I'm not allowed to name them, but they phone me frequently to talk about these issues. And they say, one called me a couple of weeks ago, tremendously frustrated, saying, if they just cut my community police funding in half and sent me a tank. Well, here's the issue.
Where was that? Where do you need a tank?
That happens. We've certainly got a lot of police departments that are militarizing.
Well, the militarization of police is a real problem, and it's the problem that has caused this divide between minority communities and police.
Certainly an image problem, just as much as it is a financial and.
Of course it is, and when you think about it, and I will get back to your question, I apologize, that police and people in poorer neighborhoods should be allies. Who suffers most from violent crime? People in more poverty-stricken neighborhoods. These should be allies. The way we police now, though, tends to be based more on response. So police are just responding to things all the time. So what do police see of a minority community? The criminals, the problems, the assaults, the murders, the drug cases, and the rapes. If we went back to an era where we're more concentrated on community policing, which used to be called patrolling, right? You knew the cop on the beat. He knew you. He knew who causes the problems.
Prevention rather than...
It's prevention
Yes.
rather than response.
Yes.
But it also makes people know each other.
Sure, but isn't that what broken windows policing was, where it was preventing small crimes and the escalation of, someone's jumping turnstile, they're breaking a window, public urination, that then escalates into something more violent because they know they can get away with it.
They know it's the same guy.
They get the rush.
I mean, yeah, broken windows theory says that the same guy who jumps the subway turnstile is the same guy who mugs the old lady, is the same guy selling drugs. I think that its reputation is maybe a little better than its effect, but it's not a bad idea, but it's still responsive. It's still responsive.
A lot of things are great ideas that, when put into practice, don't always necessarily work as well as they could or should.
As well as they
It's just
could or
because
should.
There's not consistency. One of the things we love here on the show is when someone can talk about important social issues and then do so in a entertaining way, to fold social issues into something that's not necessarily nonfiction. It's fictional, it's fun to read, and you still get a little bit of an education. So we strongly, I don't think that's in the camera shot. There you go. Nope. It's behind Carrie's Bold Cup.
I'm honored to be behind Carrie's Bold Cup. That's fine.
Don Winslow's The Force. You can find it on Bookstr. You can find it on anywhere you find your books. So we appreciate you coming in and sharing it with us.
Appreciate you having me.
I'll go and pick it up. And I'm going to have you sign that one so I can read it myself.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.
Stephen King wrote a very nice comment on it. He said straight, "The Force is mesmerizing, a triumph. Think The Godfather only with cops. It's that good." That's by Stephen King. That's a heck of an endorsement. So
Thanks very much.
if it's half as good as this discussion has been, it will be incredible. So Don Winslow, thank you very much for joining us.
Appreciate your time. Thanks very much.